Welcome to the John DeVito Show. And today I have a very interesting show. Over the last few years, I have gotten to know Pamela Smart pretty well through correspondence via email with her in prison. As you probably are aware, if you followed my show, I've done several interviews with Smart's mother, that's Mrs. Wojcik. I've also done interviews with Diane Diamond from Entertainment Tonight, Eleanor Pam, and a variety of other people who are very close to Pamela Smart and the Pamela Smart case. Now, I'm going to give you a brief history of what happened in the Pamela Smart murder case, and then I have an exclusive statement that I'm going to read to you that Pamela sent directly to me. Now, in addition to this statement, she is also working on a list of bullet points that she's going to send to me that is going to explain the smoking gun of the Cecilia Pierce tapes that were so damning to her in the murder trials back in 1990. Now, one of the things I look at, I've talked to Pam quite a bit, and she has been condemned permanently in the state of New Hampshire. And the people in New Hampshire have no interest in giving her a second chance. But after talking to her, I still have a lot of doubt as to whether or not she really played a part in the planning of this murder. And the one thing that's very difficult for me to get past is the fact that all four of the young men who were involved in the robbing and the murder of her husband, that includes the gunman, have all been released from prison. Now, she was charged with having sex with Billy Flynn and manipulating the boys into killing her husband. Now, the boys were portrayed as these innocent young men who were not worldly. In fact, they were the opposite. If you read the book written by Pam's mother, and if you go into some of the details of the case, these boys all had criminal records, and they had been robbing people. Billy Flynn was having sex with multiple partners at this time. And on top of that, these boys all had connections with law enforcement up in the Seabrook, New Hampshire area. So I was told in the initial interviews that after the boys went to Gregory Smart's house and they shot and killed him at point blank range, they took the contents of what they had stolen to Hampton Beach and were looking to sell his contents on the strip in Hampton Beach. Now, shortly after this, the boys were also caught robbing a storage facility. So these young boys were not these innocent young men that have been portrayed by the media. So I'm not going to make this a long podcast, but I want to give everybody a brief synopsis if you're not familiar with this murder case. Now, the Pamela Smart murder case happened back in 1990. This was literally the first murder case that went worldwide as far as media coverage. It was before O.J. Simpson. It was before Michael Jackson. And this case happened in a small area of New Hampshire. And Pamela Smart was a media personnel in the school. And she was having sex with Billy Flynn, who was 16 years old. She was 22. Now, Pamela had just found out that her husband had cheated on her. She describes her mental state as heartbroken, and she admits fully that she made a huge mistake in getting sexually involved with the 16-year-old Billy Flynn. Now, the one thing about this case that always sticks out to me is Pamela Smart has never denied having sex with Billy Flynn. She's never denied that. She's admitted it from day one, and she's admitted many of the things she's been accused of. The one thing that she still to this day, even though now she's in her mid-50s, her mother and father are elderly and ill, she has not admitted that she played a part in the murder, even though it may make it easier for her to have a chance at mercy or a chance to get out of prison. Why would she do this? Either A, she doesn't want to admit the truth and wants us all to believe that she's innocent, or B, she is telling the truth. The boys acted alone, and she has been in prison for the majority of her adult life for something that she did not do. Now, from my perspective, in life without the possibility of parole, there is no mercy involved. There is no feeling bad for Pamela Smart. I get that. But just imagine if, in fact, we got it wrong and Pamela Smart did not convince the boys to kill her husband and they acted alone. She's been in prison for all of her adult life after having her husband murdered by these boys. Now, I wouldn't have a problem as much if the jury made their decision and the boys, the actual gunman, the man that took a gun, held it to her husband's head, and shot him in the head at point blank range. That person is now free from prison. And you hear people say, well, they were all 16 years old. They weren't all 16. I believe one was 18. But they were young. They were manipulated. You know, I'm a man. I was 16, 17, 18 years old at one point also. I had women that I really cared about. When I was 20, I dated a 23-year-old woman. And we broke up, and I was devastated. But I never in a million years, if someone had told me to go in and kill my husband, at that point, that's when I'm checking out. I don't care how whipped I am in the relationship. I'm not going to physically go into a resident and kill someone. The boys have to be held responsible for what they did, regardless of their age, regardless of the circumstance. So let me give you a quick synopsis on the case, and then I'm going to read Pamela Smart's statement that she's only given to me. She trusts me, and I will do nothing to jeopardize that trust. I'm going to read her statement word for word, and then the follow-up to this is going to be that she is sending me a bullet point list that will list out all the different things that happened during the Cecilia Pierce interview. She claims that she knew Cecilia Pierce was wired. Her lawyer had already told her that Pierce was going to be wired. And she went to this meeting looking to get information from Cecilia Pierce. So that's what Pamela has said. And keep in mind now, since 1990, even though it may give her a chance to get out of prison, she will not admit that she played a part in manipulating these boys and asking them to murder her husband. So either A, she's a liar, or B, she's telling the truth, and she has lost her entire adult life to this situation. Now, I haven't forgotten about Gregory Smart. I realize he was murdered. And I realize that whoever murdered him should be punished to the fullest extent of the law. But even if Pamela Smart had manipulated these boys, she didn't pull the trigger. She did not kill Gregory Smart. The boys killed him. They could have made the decision to go to the police. They could have made the decision to tell an adult. They could have made a decision not to do this. And even if Billy Flynn was whipped by Pamela Smart, the other three boys were not. And they went along. One drove. They went into the house. They stole things from the house. And they shot and killed her husband in the head. She did not do that. So I guess my question is, does she deserve mercy at this point? She was tried in New Hampshire. She's been moved to upstate New York like a dirty secret. They don't want her in the area. Why is that? What were the ties between the boys and law enforcement in New Hampshire? Did they get beneficial treatment because of that? These are questions I would all like to see be answered. And if anything, I would like to see another trial so she gets a chance to answer for herself, and the people involved in this case are asked questions about their involvement. So, without further ado for my part, let me read this brief article, and then I'm going to read her statement, word for word. All right, so Pamela Smart is serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole in connection with her husband's death in 1990. She maintains that she had nothing to do with Greg Smart's murder. Pamela Smart is serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole in connection with her husband's death in 1990. She maintains that she had nothing to do with Greg Smart's murder. On May 1st, 1990, 16-year-old Billy Flynn, who's now living free in Maine, and 17-year-old Patrick Randall entered the Derry condominium shared by Pamela Smart and Greg Smart. The two forced Greg to his knees in the foyer as Randall held a knife to the man's throat. Flynn fired a hollow point bullet into his head, killing him. Now, there has been a lot of talk about whether or not Billy Flynn was actually the gunman because it was showed that he fired the gun with the wrong hand compared to what was reported in the case. Pamela Smart, who was 22 when her husband was killed, was convicted of being an accomplice to first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole after her 1991 trial that gathered attention across the world. The world had never seen anything like it. It was insane what happened during her trial, all the coverage that it received. Pamela Smart had denied knowing about the plot to murder her husband, but the state star's witness, a teenage intern who Smart confided secretly recorded her after the killing saying, quote unquote, "If you tell the fucking truth, you'll send me to the slammer for the rest of my fucking life." So that is something that was on tape. It was the most damning evidence against Pamela Smart. And this is something that I have asked her to answer for. And we're not going to hear that today in the statement, but she is working on that right now. And when I get that, I will read it word for word. So according to trial testimony, Smart was one of Flynn's instructors in a self-awareness program at Winnicott High School in Hampton when she seduced him. She allegedly told him she needed her husband killed because she feared she would lose everything if they divorced. Flynn testified at Smart's trial that she threatened to break up with him if he did not kill her husband. Flynn later was convicted of second-degree murder. Second-degree murder, even though he held the gun to Gregory Smart's head and pulled the trigger and blew his head off. Second-degree murder. Randall, who held Greg Smart down as Billy Flynn shot him, was convicted of second-degree murder. He received a sentence of 40 years to life with 12 years of the minimum sentence deferred. That sentence was later reduced. Two other accomplices in the case, Raymond Fowler and Vance Ladamy, were paroled in 2005. Both were in the gateway car outside the home when Greg Smart was killed. Pamela Smart made a request for a pardon hearing, which was denied by the state in 2005. 20 years after Greg Smart's death, Pamela Smart spoke to News 9 in New Hampshire, and her quote is this, word for word, "I'm so much more than the worst mistake of my life," she said, "and I feel like I've been frozen in time inside that mistake to get involved with Bill, and I have never been able to get out of it." In a 2010 interview, Pamela Smart insisted she was innocent. "No, I did not. I never wanted Greg killed," Smart said. "I never wanted him to kill Greg. I never asked him to. I never insinuated that I wanted him to kill my husband." Pamela Smart also described what life was like in prison. "Well, it's a 7 by 10 foot space, so it's kind of hard to have anyone else there with me. It's just small, just a bed and a toilet," she said. "It kind of looks like it does on TV usually, except we don't have bars, we have doors." Meanwhile, in 2010, in an interview, Greg Smart's family said that without an admission of guilt from Pamela Smart, they will fight to keep her in prison for life. If it wasn't for her, Greg would still be here. Greg's father, Bill Smart, said she can be remorseful about going out with Bill Flynn. "I'm just saying to her, if she ever admits that she did it, we may have other considerations to talk about at that time." So that's pretty much where we are. So one more thing I'm going to read, and then I'm going to get into her statement that she made exclusively to me. On July 10th, 2014, News 9 learned all 4 people convicted in Greg Smart's murder, except for Pamela Smart, were physically out of prison, including Billy Flynn, the gunman who shot Gregory Smart in the head. So there you have it. That's what happened. It was a crazy case. It was something that Pamela Smart has maintained her innocence since the case happened. And one thing I have to note is just the fact that she kept her married name of Pamela Smart. You would think that if she was involved in this, she would have gotten rid of the name, maybe gone back to Pamela Wojcik, her maiden name. But the fact that she's been in prison for as long as she has, and she initially admitted she had the affair with Billy Flynn, but has never admitted that she played a part in the murder. Again, I'll go back to the point I said. Either she's a liar, which many or most people believe, but I'm asking you to consider the other side of it. What if she's not lying? What if she is telling the truth? The murderers are all out, and she's a woman this has been pinned on, and she's been in prison for 33 years. And even now, I've said this to her point blank. I've said to her that even if you did do it, because I'm not, blindly stupid. I talked to Pam Smart and I told her point blank, I don't know if you did it or not. Maybe you did it. I've said that to her. But the one thing I do always come back to is that even if she had manipulated Billy Flynn into killing Gregory Smart, the gunmen are out. If she was the manipulator that got this done, shouldn't she get a chance at freedom also? I mean, if the four gunmen were still in and they got life in prison without the possibility of parole, then honestly, I would not have as much feeling that she deserves to be out of prison. But since the four killers are free and they're living their lives, why hasn't Pamela Smart been set free? Why hasn't she been given a chance to speak for herself again? What's being hidden? All right, so keep in mind, this is a quote, word for word, that I'm going to read from Pamela Smart. I don't believe I should change anything. She actually trusted me and told me I could edit this, but I'm not going to edit it. I think it has to be precisely in his words or it loses the power as to what she is saying. So keep in mind now, this comment has only come to me on the John DeVito show. And when I get the other comment about her refuting the Cecilia Pierce tapes, I will also read that word for word. All right, so here goes. This is from Pamela Smart to me in email from prison. At this point, I have been incarcerated for 33 years for a crime I never committed. Those who did commit it and admitted to a cold-blooded execution are free and have been free for years. I made many mistakes and I exercised incredibly bad judgment. And for that, I am deeply sorry. I will always carry the shame, guilt, and remorse over knowing that my husband Greg is no longer alive because of me. That is an incredibly heavy burden, but it's mine to bear. I have been incarcerated since the young age of 22, and I have spent my entire adult life in prison. While here, I was beaten by other inmates to the point where I had to have plastic surgery on my face so that my face could be cut open and peeled back and a plate could be inserted. I can never feel anything on the left side of my face again. I was also sexually assaulted by a prison guard who was supposed to be protecting me. I say this not to elicit sympathy, but so you can know that these are the realities of prison life and my experience. I came to prison as a young woman, and I am now elderly. My life sentence is really a death sentence, death by incarceration. Since I came into prison so young, I could literally spend 70 or more total years in prison. Every day, I am simply waiting to die. This sentence is devoid of any hope. It is perpetual punishment. My mother and father are too old and sick to visit me anymore. I have not seen them in years. I want more than anything to care for them so they do not die alone. If I do not get out of here soon, I will never see them alive again. One day, someone will come to visit me, and in the cold, lifeless gray visiting room, they will tell me that my precious, precious mother or father is gone, and I will be left to grieve here alone. I wonder every day, When will enough be enough? When will this vengeance end? This sentence tells me that my life does not matter. It tells me there is no compassion, no forgiveness, and no mercy in this world. Despite my hopeless circumstances, from the pit of inconceivability, I have managed to hang on tightly to a sliver of hope, in the defiant hope that only God can so mercifully provide in hopeless circumstances. It is to that I desperately cling, praying that one day in the not so distant future, someone with the power to end this death sentence will have the compassion and the courage to do so. So, for me, I don't know how you feel. It's hard for me to hear that. Now, I will say that if Pamela Smart is guilty of everything that the state accused her of, if she manipulated Billy Flynn, if she encouraged or threatened to break up with him, if Billy Flynn would not kill her husband, I still come back to the fact that Pamela Smart did not kill Gregory Smart. She may have asked somebody else to kill her husband, but she did not physically hold a gun to his head and shoot him in the head. Billy Flynn did that, and he's free. He's free. He's a murderer. He's walking around. I don't care if he was 16, 26, 36. He is the man that made the conscious decision to walk into that house, point a gun to that woman's head, to Pamela Smart husband's head, and shoot him in the head. Billy Flynn is the one that took Gregory Smart's life. Or, as some people say, Billy Flynn was in fact not the gunman. One of the other young men was the gunman. And that person is in fact the murderer. So, I guess the question is, when is enough is enough? That's the question that she asks. Even if she did everything they said, she's in prison for the rest of her life, and the four young men that carried out the murder are all free. Think of the flip side. If she did not encourage Billy Flynn and the other boys to go out and kill her husband, you have a woman here that made a very bad error in judgment by sleeping with a 16-year-old boy when she was 22. But is that enough to put someone in prison for the rest of their lives? In my opinion, no. So I still see a lot of unanswered questions in this case. And the state will not allow Pamela Smart to speak for herself again. I think that being that this case happened back in 1990, the press was beyond anything the public had ever seen at that time. Doesn't she deserve the chance to argue for her innocence? Again, and again, if they find that she's guilty, she's guilty. But, as I go back to, it's hard for me to process the fact that she did not pull the trigger. The trigger men are out free, and she's still in prison for the rest of her life. It just doesn't add up to me. So, that's all I want to put out there. I've gotten to know Pamela Smart pretty well over the last few years. I've gotten to know her mother. And it's just such an awful situation. And I really want to just send this message out to Gregory Smart's family also. I'm sure that you may not hear this podcast or you may not care to hear it. I'm not taking any side against your son. I have 3 sons myself, and I can't imagine the pain and suffering that you've gone through. And I want to say that I pray for your son every day. I hope he's in a good place. And I'm sorry about what happened to him. And I can't even imagine the level of pain you have dealt with over the years. And I am terribly sorry for you that you have lost your son. And I hope to God that Greg is in a good place. And I hope to God that you have found peace with this happening. Because even with Vengence being taken out against the boys, the gunman, and Pamela, it doesn't bring your son back. And I can't imagine what that feels like. So God bless you, the Smart family. And for all of you that tuned into this show, I hope it makes you think a little bit. because we hear a lot about the brainwashing that happens in the media every day. And is this an instance of that where we were brainwashed to believe that she was the Black Widow and she was behind this? Maybe she was, maybe she wasn't. But she has maintained her innocence from day one about being involved in the murder. She never denied having sex with Billy Flynn, not at all. She admitted her role in every other area of the case except for this case. And she's been told point blank by countless people that if she admits her guilt, she may get another chance, but she won't admit it. What does she have to lose at this point? If I'm her and I'm looking at spending the rest of my life in prison, I would come out and admit my guilt if I had, in fact, played a part in it. If I hadn't played a part in it, I would never admit my guilt. Is that where we are? I don't know. All right. I want to thank all of you for tuning in. Thank you for coming into the John DeVito Show. Once I receive the additional information from Pamela Smart, I will be scheduling another podcast and reading off her statement refuting what happened with Cecilia Blake in the tapes that were so damning in this case. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the John DeVito Show.